What's your message?
Well, our message here, what we see in D.C. and across the country at this March for Our Lives is just the latest chapter in sort of this sad history of liberals trying to scapegoat responsible gun owners for the crimes committed by people committing crimes. And so what we're hearing from these college students, and high school students particularly in this case, is that they are not being represented by either the March for Our Lives or the walkouts that happened last week at high schools across the country. And they believe in the Second Amendment, and they believe that their teachers and others should have the right to protect them if necessary.
And the environment for those gun supporters is probably not ripe for them to speak out.
Oh yeah, you're exactly right. And what we've actually seen in a few situations is our Young Americans for Freedom activists have actually been threatened by administrators for either asking to not participate in the walkouts or holding any sort of pro-Second Amendment, pro-Constitution signage. And that's just ridiculous. If the school is going to use instructional time in order to allow a walkout to happen, they can't just push one side of this conversation.
And you have a problem with the walkouts in general, right?
Well, the problem is just when it becomes one-sided, as we've seen. At these high schools, the walkouts were mostly, they were billed as though they were a remembrance for the victims of the tragedy in Parkland, but really they were a push, as we see with the March for Our Lives in D.C. today, a push to take guns away from law-abiding citizens.
You say that the shooting in Parkland was a failure of government, not the Second Amendment.
That's exactly right, and I think that's a fact that we see borne out even more so as more facts, come out about the situation and what authorities there missed and what the failures were. This was not a failure on the part of the Second Amendment.
So what should be done in schools?
Well, I think what we see and what we're hearing from the high school students that we work with all over the country is that they want their schools to be protected, but they also want Second Amendment rights to be protected. So that involves, allowing teachers, if they wish to be armed, to carry firearms in school. We see time and again that often the best way to stop a bad guy with a gun is, in fact, a good guy with a gun. And we saw that just last week in Maryland when that heroic deputy there ran towards the sound of gunfire and stopped another tragedy before it could become a mass casualty event.
And what we're seeing today, you believe, is basically the left playing politics with tragedy.
Exactly. That was sort of the really tragic thing in the wake of this, is how the left is using these high school students basically as pawns in this latest attempt to take away the constitutional rights of millions of Americans who own firearms in order to protect themselves, their families, and their property.
But you understand the anger of these protesters.
Absolutely. Look, what happened was a clear tragedy, but when you look at the failure in this case being the government and not the Second Amendment, you realize that what needs to change is how the government acts and handles these situations and not how the government treats the law-abiding gun owners.
What we've seen today, this massive turnout, is powerful, certainly, but it also, these rallies have been sort of geared towards an attack on the NRA and on politicians aligned with the group. Does the NRA suffer from this? What are the repercussions, do you think?
Well, I think one of the main problems that we see here is sort of the hypocrisy of the event, as you mentioned here today. Many of the people who are performing today benefit from the peace of mind knowing that their lives and their property are protected by people with guns. And so for them to all come here to D.C. and do it in a push in order to take that peace of mind away from millions of Americans is just extremely hypocritical. And, I think the NRA is obviously being scapegoated along with all those other law-abiding citizens.
Well, there's certainly a lot of push for change here, and I guess we're just going to have to wait and see if that change happens. Spencer Brown, go ahead.
I think time will tell if anything happens. I think what we've seen from the president tweeting today and other things is that he is looking at solutions. One of the people who usually, or the results that aren't getting the coverage is the bills that were signed into law yesterday to help protect schools and provide opportunities for students and administrators to protect themselves by their Second Amendment rights.
All right. Well, Spencer Brown, spokesman for Young Americans Foundation, we appreciate your time today.
Thank you.